What's that? Radical 2 times radical 2, which is what?
Radical 4.
Which is?
2.
Okay. All right, what's that one?
7.
Right, because it's square root of 49, which is 7. What's that one? $38. So what do you notice happens when you square a square root?
They cancel out.
Yeah, and you're just left with what's inside. Is that okay? Okay. So we have, this is going to be where it's going to be tough for me. So we have this. What happens if we multiplied I by I? What would we get? Or just anything in general, like what's x times x?
2x.
No, it's what? X squared. Okay, so then what's I times I?
I squared.
I squared. Okay, so then right after all this stuff that we just did, what is, right, I squared would be the same as saying radical negative 1 squared, which would be what?
1.
Hmm.
1.
No.
I squared 1.
Well, okay, yes, this is I squared, but what is, like, so what is, when you take radical negative 1 and square it, what do you get?
Negative 1.
Negative 1. Okay, so then I squared is really
Negative 1.
-1. Okay, and so then if we took I squared and multiplied it by I again, we'd get I to the what?
Third.
To the third. Plus. And so then, we had, we have this idea over here. Where's that? I squared and negative 1. And then we multiply by I again. I get I cubed. And we multiply that by I. And so then what is it? I cubed equal to?
1.
No. So, it could also, we could have multiplied by negative, or radical negative 1 if you wanted. But radical negative 1 is I, right? These things are the same right there. Okay, so negative 1, radical negative 1, which would be negative 1 I. Can I just write negative I? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, and so then if we multiplied again by I, it would be I to the what? To the fourth. And that would be the same as, what would this give you? Well, what is I though? Like negative I squared, right? So this would be negative I squared. But what did we just decide what did we just decide I squared was? Okay, so then this is really negative 1, which is 1. Okay, so then I to the fourth is 1. Okay, yeah, so good. So hold on, let me erase all this. So you just said that the pattern repeats itself. Does anyone know what that means? So before we get to that, this is super important, okay? First, you need to know this. But you should never give me an answer when I is anything except for I to the first. You should never have, your answer is not simplified if the exponent is anything besides 1. So all answers are going to be either I, -1, negative I, or 1. That's the first thing you got to make sure you understand. But then he says the pattern starts over, and so this is going to be pretty important. So then, if we were at I to the 4th and we multiply by I again, what? I to the 4th becomes what? I to the 5th. But really, this is equivalent to I times I to the 4th. And what did we just decide I to the 4th was?
1.
And so then what's 1 times I? I. Okay, and so then if we're at I to the 5th and we multiply by I again, we're at I to the 6th then, and then that's really, we just decided that this is what I to the 5th is, so if we multiply it by another I, we get what? I to the 2nd power, but we decided that was -1, okay, and so then we go and multiply it by another I, and so we're at I to the what? 7th, and so then that's really -1 times another I, which is -I. And so then we take I to the 7th and multiply by another I, we got I to the 8th, but that's really -I times I, which is really -I squared, but we just decided that that I squared is really -1, so then it's I. Oh, I'm sorry, there's 1. Yeah, sorry, it's 1. It's 1. Sorry. Okay, so then if we multiplied I to the 8th by I, we'd be at I to the 9th, but then we could just go through the same process, and so then, this is the same as I to the 9th, and then I to the 10th, I to the 11th, and then I to the 12th. So that's what that means, that the pattern repeats itself. Is that okay? Start counting, but we need to figure out another way, because we're also going to do like I to the 57th, or I to the 746. So you don't want to add the square root of -I, but that's not none of our 4 answers. Well, so how do we do it? I mean, you could count, or you could use advanced math.
Because 21 is, I know 20 is 4 times 5, so 4, 5 times with 1 left over. So you're just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that 5 times do that, and then there's 1 more to go back up to the top.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, right, if you notice that there's only 4 spots, and you just keep counting through cycles of 4, and you reset, and then cycles of 4, and reset. Well, then how many cycles of 4 do we get through when you do 20? 1. 4. No. 5. 5. But how would you get that number? How would we get 5? Using 20, and so, right, so then, okay, so you would say, well, there's 21, I's here. But we know every 4 reset, right? So advanced division math. And then, so then it's equivalent to what? Right, so you said it went through 5 times, but how many was left over? 1. Okay, and then your calculator would probably call it this. So then I to the 21st is really what then? So right, we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Well, okay, so not 5. Don't worry about the 5 right now. Right, because we went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We did that 5 times, and then how many more did we have to go? 1. So where are we on the list then? So, is that okay? All right, what about I to the 57th? What are we going to do? But did the amount of options change? Okay, so then it's pretty ridiculous to count 57 times, and definitely 746 times, so what do we,
57 divided by 4.
oh, so 57 divided by 4,
It's 14. 14.1.
it's 14 1/4 again?
Yeah.
Alright, so I just picked that number. Okay, so then your calculator would say it's 14.25. Okay, so then what's I to the 57th? I. Okay, so then what about I to the, hopefully I picked a different one this time. What about I to the 746? Alright, so, oops, 746, 180 what? 0.5. 0.5 is what as a fraction? 2/4. So then, right, we go through 186 times, and then which one do we stop on?
I squared.
I squared, but we don't, no one wants I squared. You want what?
Negative 1.
-1. Bless you. Is that okay? So does it matter? Does this number matter? No, it makes no difference. It's only the decimal. Okay, so I to any power, what are the steps? Because maybe you want some steps. I don't know. So what's the first thing you should do? Divide what by 4? Not the variable. Exponent by 4. And then what? What are you checking? Are you checking the how many times it goes into it? Okay, so you check the decimal. Okay, and so if it's 0.25, okay, so if this ends in 0.25, then the answer is I. If it ends in what?
0.5.
Ends in 0.5, it's -1. What if it's negative I? What would it end in?
And it's in 7.5.
Okay, ends in 0.75.
And for a 4, it's be a whole number.
Okay, whole number. Good. And it's very important. Your answers are only simplified if you're left with an I, a -1, a negative I, or a 1, no matter what other exponent you have with your I. Is that okay? Okay, so if you say that this answer is -11, then you're missing the cardinal rule of imaginary numbers. Actually, that's not true. You actually will get to the right answer, but I don't think you did it. I don't think you're doing it right. Because what do you, this one actually works out just fine. But what do you need to make sure you do first? Yeah, so you need, so actually this works out fine, but, right, you need to make sure that you do this first because that's going to come back and get you eventually. Okay, so now, when we square I, we get what? And when we square 11, we get what? Or square the square root of 11. Okay, and so then what is I squared?
-1.
Okay, so this one, okay, so this one actually worked out, but I would be careful. So it is -11. But make sure that you change an imaginary number to an imaginary number first. All right, what do you need to make sure you do first?
We got it right. 245. 243.
Yeah, you better do that first, okay? So then this is negative I, and this is still 8I for right now. Then this one becomes I radical 243. Okay, now what? And 243 goes into what? Or breaks down into what? 3 and 81. Okay, and so then if you really know, then you kind of could stop there, because what's the square root of 81?
9.
Okay, so then we have, right, negative I times 8I times I times what? Is everyone okay with that? Why it's 9 square root of 3? Okay, so now we got all kinds of stuff, but so what happens now? No, that's not I to the 8th. That's 8 times I. All right, so one step at a time. So negative I times 8I is what? Times 9I radical 3. So now what? Oh, what's 8 times 9? Okay, so negative 72. I to the what? Third. Square root of 3. Is that done?
No.
Why not? No, you don't need to simplify 72 because it's not in the radical. But you do. This isn't done because of the I to the third. So then, so I to the third is really negative I. So negative 72 times negative I